what I'm here today to do is not to give you the detail of the Sweyne Park experiment. That'll come later on. I want to give you a snapshot of my experiences as a teacher and the experiences of my colleagues in Sweyne Park. I can still remember the first time that I walked into the classroom that had been treated to the highest standard. It was a classroom I'd worked in on quite a number of occasions, and I didn't like working in that classroom. It seemed to be noisy, the children seemed to be less settled, and progress was slower. As I walked through the door, though, something had changed. I couldn't quite put my finger on it, but everything seemed to feel calmer, stiller, almost reverential. And the voice I was using somehow seemed to drop. And that really stuck in my mind. It told me that I wasn't just dealing with a project that was to help the deaf children in our school. It was something that was going to have an impact on all the children in our school. And we're taking a risk because we've got a couple of children who are going to tell you what their experiences are, and that's always a risk, but let's see. As a teacher, when you start a lesson, it's sometimes a bit of a challenge because you've got to get those first moments right. In our school, lessons are an hour long, and if you set off on that journey of an hour in the wrong frame of mind, or with the children in the wrong frame of mind, the amount of progress you can make is going to be that much more limited. Children will arrive in a room after coming down the corridor, talking about what they've done at break, lunchtime, their previous lesson. They'll come into a room, not to be disruptive, but they're into their bags, they're shuffling their chairs about. And the first thing you do as a teacher is raise your voice to bring their attention to you so that you can start their lesson. Now, the hairs go up on the back of the children's necks. You've alienated one or two, you've lost one or two, and you can't take them with you on that journey. In a treated classroom, you can immediately, quickly attract their attention. You can welcome them as they come into the room and talk in a normal tone of voice. We go on to the teacher's craft. Well, the teacher's craft is a rich and varied thing. To some, what it still consists of is teacher talking, and the teacher talking long enough for what they say to penetrate the flesh and the bone, to get into the head and to stay there. But if that's your idea of teaching, all that's going to happen is the children are going to go as far as you can. And I can guarantee you that in any classroom, there are going to be children there who are quite different to you, and in many cases are going to be better than you. If you are going to limit them by just talking to them and not allowing them to go off on tangents, to explore ideas, to think out of the box, as the phrase goes, you're not doing the children justice. So you're not just a teacher. There's some of these catchphrases, a facilitator, you're guiding, you're inspiring. And while you're doing that as well, you've got to monitor and you've got to assess what goes on so that you can judge your approach to the children to be at the right level, at the right target. In a classroom that isn't acoustically treated, you're out of your comfort zone because the noise level will start to rise. And you'll always want to be able to bring the children back so that you can do an input. If it's a noisy environment, an environment where you haven't easily got the control, you don't take risks. In an acoustically treated classroom, it's much easier to bring the children back on task without you needing to raise your voice, so you can go that little bit further. One of the things that we've found in our acoustically treated classrooms is that sound is much more directional. You can hear who's talking. You can tell where the sound is coming from. And if it happens to be some off-task behaviour, a conversation out of place, then you can deal with it by a quiet word, the teacher's stare, or whatever it happens to be. What you don't have to do is to raise your voice and say to the whole class, right, who's talking? Let's put a stop to this so that we can make progress. I can address you in a quiet tone, and I can deal with that quickly and effectively. You take it for granted that the children in your classroom can hear, but actually in reverberant classrooms, that's not always the case. as Julian was saying, 3 or 4 rows back, and the speech clarity starts to disappear. And what happens is the children are putting their effort into actually hearing what you're saying, not understanding what you're saying so that they can learn. And what sort of a teacher would I, or any in the profession, be if I was trying to teach you something that was easy to understand? I want to challenge you, I want to push you, I want to stretch you. And to do that, you've got to be able to hear with clarity in the first place, so that the processing power of the brain can go into stretching your mind. IT suites. In IT suites, the children will sit behind a computer screen. You won't necessarily know what's going on. You'll have 30 machines or so buzzing away. But nevertheless, the teacher still needs to address the class as a whole. What we find in treated classrooms is that the background noise gets absorbed, and so the predominant voice, the predominant sound, the teacher's voice in most cases, can be heard by all children, and the teacher can interact much more effectively. We're in a nice sunny day at last, so the windows go open. In urban environments, in lots of environments, there's a lot of background noise. We find that if you ask for the windows to be shut, then the children get restless, it gets hot and sticky. So obviously you're going to have the windows open. But with the windows open in acoustically treated rooms, the sound comes in, it hits the treated ceiling, or it hits the acoustic wall panels, and it's absorbed. It isn't a distraction like it used to be, or like it is in the classrooms that aren't treated. And in most classrooms nowadays, you have a noise generator right in the middle. The overhead projector, the LCD projector, going onto the whiteboard. The noise that makes now seems to be absorbed, and it isn't a distraction. We have, as you've been made aware, hearing impaired children in our school. You always used to know who the hearing impaired children are, because they're the ones that had to sit at the front because they're deaf. Now they get the opportunity to sit elsewhere in the class. And one little bit of anecdotal evidence was, there was one of our deaf children, and they were joining in a conversation that wasn't related to the lesson. They were actually talking about EastEnders and what had gone on in the storyline. But actually, that was a first, because they were, for once, included in ordinary conversation, ordinary life. They hadn't been able to do that before. There is a place for noise and sound in classrooms. In media, for instance, you're showing films and you're talking perhaps about the soundtrack. In a classroom that isn't acoustically treated, you have a massive noise. You can get the general message in conjunction with the images that are being shown. In a well-treated classroom, you can pick up all those fine nuances of sound that has gone to make that soundtrack, and you can get the real understanding of what's gone into making a big movie. And that's been a big impact in media lessons. Move on to group work. Group work is good. I know it's good because Ofsted say it's good, so that's that one sort of dealt with. 20, 30 people in a class, and you are asking for 4 or 5 different conversations to all happen at the same time. Chaos. The technical name, the Lombard effect. Basically what happens is that the different children are talking to each other. It's getting a little bit noisy, so they talk a bit louder to be heard. That makes a bit more noise, so the others talk a bit louder, and before long you have a din going on, and the children, although they're all on task, although they're doing what they should be, are virtually shouting at each other. Not good. Teacher has to bring it all back. But in group work, the children learn from each other. They have that bit of freedom to express themselves in the safe environment. They express themselves to their friends perhaps much more easily than they do in a larger audience. So learning can take place, and the teacher, who's trying to assess, monitor, give the input, can tune into those individual conversations quite easily, and they can know where to make an input. They can hear the lesson is going on task, that it's going in the right direction. Or if it is going on a tangent, off on a tangent, and it's a good tangent, then they can adapt what they're going to do. And with the acoustically treated classrooms, we find that the noise levels automatically stay at a lower level. The children, they come in all sorts of shapes and sizes at our school. Some are up there, some are down there, and their voices have a tremendous range as well. Some children will sit at the back of the class, some children will sit at the front of the class. Some of the children have got the weakest voices, but when you're doing a question and answer session, it's very tempting to take the children at the front that are there with their hands up and ask them, because that's the easy option. But as a teacher, what you sometimes have to do is find that person at the back of the room who hasn't got the hand up and ask them what they think or what their answer might be, because you're making sure everyone takes part. With an acoustically treated classroom, children can hear each other talk, even with the wide variety of voices that they have. And trust me, they do come with a wide variety of voices. Schools are also stereotypically quite noisy environments, with children rushing about and being children, basically. But the social spaces, the corridors, the dining halls, the assembly halls, are rooms where are spaces where a lot of interaction takes place. School is so much more about the experience as a whole than just what goes on in the classroom. We have to make sure children are educated in particular subjects, but we have the wider responsibility of educating them for life. And they need to learn about social interaction. Deaf children have often been excluded from interaction because in corridors, in dining halls, there is so much noise going on that they can't take part. Also, children have a wide variety of complex needs sometimes, and there is the need for the quiet spaces, there is the need for the still places. If you can intervene early with some of these complex problems, then you stand a good chance of better preparing children for life. If I'm a teacher, I've got my principal tool as my voice. There's lots of other things that I do, my body language, my eyes, my expression, my tone. If I'm in a classroom that hasn't been acoustically treated, I'm putting most of my voice's power into projecting it to the class at the back of the room. I then lose the ability to use the tone and expression that can get over the detailed points and help me explain things effectively. In a good acoustically treated classroom, I can talk at a much lower level, a normal level, and I can use my voice much more effectively. There are ways that I can amplify my voice if I do choose to talk quietly, but if I'm amplifying my voice into a reverberant space, I create a din that doesn't work that well. And then we've got the practicalities of teachers talking in a normal voice. If a teacher's off sick, essentially it's 200 quid a day to get in a supply teacher when you've included all the on costs. Now, good acoustics isn't a reason to just think about the economics. Good acoustics allows teachers to be there in front of children. Children enjoy the continuity. The teachers, if a teacher is in front of their class for a period of time, then you will make better progress. If you have different faces, different ways of doing things from different staff, you don't get that continuity. Teachers at our school have said they feel less stressed, they feel more relaxed when they're in rooms that are acoustically well treated. And voice care issues can be a significant cause of absence in schools. So the big question is, does it improve academic performance? Well, anecdotally, we have got a lot of evidence. But in secondary schools, children get up every hour and they move to different classrooms. They have different teachers. But you put all these little bits together and you start to see a package coming together. And I mentioned Ofsted earlier. Well, Ofsted came to our school a few years ago and they said we were good. We then started to do a lot of work in the field of acoustics, and last time they came, they said we're outstanding. Now, I can't say that that's all down to acoustics. There's a lot of very good teachers working in a lot of different ways, working very hard. But I, personally, and the other teachers at our school are convinced that good acoustics in classrooms can make a fundamental difference to the quality of teaching and learning. So I say, yes, it does make a fundamental difference. It does improve standards. I've talked for long enough. I think now we'll hear from Grace and Eleanor, 2 Year 10 pupils at Sweyne Park School.
Good evening. My name is Sweyne Gillmore and I'm in Year 10 at the Sweyne Park School in Sweyne. I am apparently deaf and aware to talking implants. Some of the rooms I work in being so treated. I do so much better for me because of my deafness. I feel included in lessons and to hear other people better and hear children better as well. I know what I'm talking about. I enjoy it. It's easy to keep up with conversations I interrupt. Before it was hard for me to interrupt because I'm always behind the conversation. It's particularly good in English, but sometimes we do role play, and some people speak very quietly or very quickly. It used to be really hard for them to follow them, but now it's much easier. There is 3 other deaf pupils in my year at school, and at the rooms are better now, and we like all our classrooms to better be due to ones that are being so treated. There are 18 deaf pupils altogether, and all like changes. We just had a soundboard to put in the hall too, that made real difference. We used to echo so much in there. Sometimes I couldn't hear properly, and now teachers and visitors sound much clearer. Because of changes, I feel part of the class more than I used to, so I'm happier and more confident. I'm more relaxed talking to hearing pupils, so I don't worry so much about what they say to me. Some friendships are easier, which is right. One of those friends is Eleanor. They've been listening. I'll hand you to Eleanor.
Good evening. My name is Eleanor Crosley and I'm also in Year 10 at the Sweyne Park School. I'm a hearing pupil, but even so, I'm aware of the differences in the classrooms that I use that have been sound treated, for example in maths, French and music. These rooms had already been treated before I started to use them at the beginning of Year 10, so I don't know what they were like before, but I can tell the difference between these classes now and the ones that have been treated. My whole class benefits because it's so much easier to hear contributions from around the room, particularly the back of the classroom. Everyone seems quieter because we don't have to shout to be heard. It's made group work easier because it doesn't get too noisy. We all seem to be working more quietly. It also feels as though the teachers are quieter and calmer so they don't have to raise their voices. If I sit at the back of the sound-treated rooms, I can hear the teacher just as clearly as when I'm sitting at the front. The atmosphere is calmer and it's easier to focus and concentrate. When I'm in classes with deaf pupils, I think it's easier for them to be involved. They can hear better, so they seem to ask and answer questions more than before. It would be great to have the same sound treatment in all of our rooms because the deaf pupils don't just use the sound-treated rooms, and it must be hard for them to cope with the differences between classrooms. Our hall has just had soundballs installed, and I think it would be great to have them in the dining room too, because it gets very noisy in there. And it's difficult for us all to hear, not just the deaf pupils. The advantage of the new soundboard is that we all benefit, all the pupils and the teachers too, not just the hearing impaired pupils. Thank you for listening.